In the early years after independence, India was still learning how to be a country, not just on maps or in speeches, but in its bones. Trains ran, offices functioned, flags were raised, but beneath all of it there was a quiet uncertainty, the kind that lingers when a nation has been born through loss, migration, and sudden responsibility. The nights were long then. In government quarters, lamps stayed on late. Papers lay scattered across wooden desks. Radios murmured news from faraway capitals, Washington, Moscow, Beijing. India listened carefully to the world because the world was not gentle. The Cold War was not announced with trumpets. It arrived softly, like a fog that crept across borders and entered drawing rooms through radio waves. Alliances formed, missiles were tested, ideologies hardened, and India stood in between. Jawaharlal Nehru spoke of non-alignment, not as indecision, but as dignity, a refusal to be pulled into someone else's war, a belief that moral leadership could offer a different path. For a while, that belief felt sufficient. Then came the mountains. In 1962, far above the plains where most Indians lived, something broke. The Himalayas, long seen as eternal guardians, became silent witnesses to a war that few had expected and even fewer understood. Indian soldiers stood in thin air, inadequately clothed, under orders shaped more by political optimism than military reality. When the fighting ended, the nation was left stunned. The war was brief. Its impact was not. India did not just lose territory, it lost certainty. People asked questions quietly at first, then more openly. Could ideals protect borders? Could restraint deter ambition? Could peace survive without preparation? Before the nation could settle into answers, another shock arrived. In October 1964, China detonated its first nuclear bomb. The news traveled across continents in seconds, but its weight sank slowly into Indian consciousness. This was different. A conventional war could be fought, lost, learned from. A nuclear weapon erased that logic. It did not care about bravery or numbers. It did not ask permission from geography. It ended conversations. In Delhi, the response was measured. Carefully worded statements emphasized restraint and global disarmament. But inside closed rooms, a deeper reckoning began. India had a choice to make, one it would never announce publicly. It could continue to rely on moral authority alone. Or it could ensure that no one would ever again mistake restraint for helplessness. The question was not whether India wanted nuclear weapons. The question was whether India could afford ignorance. At the heart of this quiet debate was a man whose life rarely raised its voice. Homi Bhabha. Bhabha was a scientist, but not the kind who lived detached from the world. He understood power, not political power, but the power of knowledge, the kind that shaped centuries. He had studied in Cambridge, worked with the finest minds of his time, and returned to India with a conviction that bordered on destiny. India, he believed, would not remain poor because of fate. It would remain poor only if it accepted dependence as permanent. To Bhabha, nuclear science was not a weapon, it was a language, and nations that did not speak it fluently would forever rely on translators. In the late 1940s and 1950s, he helped build institutions from nothing, laboratories where there were none, research cultures where skepticism once ruled. The atomic energy establishment at Trombay did not look like power, it looked like patience. Young scientists worked long hours, not because they were ordered to, but because they believed they were building something that would outlast them. The early years were idealistic, Nuclear energy was discussed as electricity, medicine, agriculture, but the world kept intruding. Each international crisis, each weapons test, each diplomatic pressure reminded India of a simple truth. Technology was never neutral. Those who possessed it decided how it would be used. India's nuclear journey, therefore, took a uniquely careful path. Not secrecy, but discretion. Not aggression, but readiness. Reactors were built, fuel cycles studied. Indigenous capability slowly replaced dependence on foreign assistance. Every step was technically peaceful and strategically meaningful. Inside government, leaders wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. Lal Bahadur Shastri was a gentle man, but not a weak one. He understood hunger and hardship intimately. Under his leadership, India faced food shortages severe enough to threaten sovereignty itself. Grain shipments arrived from abroad under programs that could be paused, delayed, or leveraged. It was a quiet lesson in vulnerability. If food could be conditional, energy could be conditional, and technology, especially nuclear technology, would certainly be conditional. India learned that sovereignty was not just political, it was technological. When Shastri died suddenly in 1966, the nation grieved quietly. Soon after, leadership passed to Indira Gandhi. She inherited not only a country, but a tension. India spoke the language of peace, but peace, she understood, required strength beneath the words. Indira Gandhi was not impulsive in these matters. The nuclear question stayed buried beneath development goals, poverty alleviation, and political consolidation. Yet the infrastructure continued to grow, not toward a bomb, toward capability. This distinction mattered deeply. India did not rush. It did not announce deadlines. It did not posture. Instead, it ensured that if the world ever forced a choice, India would not be starting from zero. Within the scientific community, debates were intense but respectful. Some believed India should never weaponize nuclear energy. That even capability carried moral risk. Others argued that capability without weaponization was itself deterrence, a signal without provocation. There were no unanimous answers. What existed was consensus on one point. India would decide for itself. This philosophy hardened when the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty began to take shape. The treaty divided the world cleanly into categories. Those who had tested nuclear weapons before a certain date would be allowed to keep them. Everyone else would be permanently barred. India saw this for what it was, not disarmament, but inheritance, power frozen in time. India refused to sign, not loudly, not angrily, but firmly. It would not accept a future where its security depended on promises made by others. Still, the program remained unannounced. Foreign observers saw research reactors and civilian projects. They did not see the full picture. By the late 1960s, India stood at a silent threshold. It possessed trained scientists, material understanding, reactor experience, and theoretical capability. What it did not possess was haste. Then came another blow. In January 1966, Homi Bhabha boarded Air India Flight 101. The plane crashed into Mont Blanc, no survivors. For a moment, the quiet fire threatened to flicker. Bhabha had been more than a scientist. He was a bridge between ambition and restraint, between knowledge and ethics. But what he left behind was stronger than any single personality. Institutions continued, leadership adapted, the philosophy remained intact. India did not announce grief as strategy. It absorbed the loss and moved forward. The late 1960s passed without explosions or declarations. To the outside world, India appeared focused on development. Inside, it was ensuring that development could never again be dictated. This was not fear-driven, it was memory-driven. Memory of borders breached, memory of aid conditional, memory of promises broken. India chose preparation over panic. Years later, when India eventually tested a nuclear device, commentators would ask why. But the answer lay not in that moment. It lay in cold nights in the Himalayas, in grain ships docked under watchful eyes, in laboratories built quietly, without banners. The nuclear program was not born from ambition. It was born from experience, from the realization that peace is strongest when it is chosen, not enforced. India's quiet fire burned slowly, not to intimidate, not to threaten, but to ensure that no one would ever again decide India's fate without India's voice. And in that silence, carefully maintained, deliberately protected, lay one of the most consequential decisions of the 20th century, a decision not announced to the world, but whispered into the future.